if I could please have Luis come back up on stage for me as well. So, as a second introduction, Luis is Chief Asia Economist for Standard & Poor's in Hong Kong, and he's worked in Asia since 2004. So, next, could I please invite Nabil Kello? Nabil is Managing Partner of First Consult and Managing Director of the Bridges program. I'm sure you all know the MasterCard-funded jobs creation program that he is absolutely passionate about. And Rahel Bundajani. Rahel flew in this morning to be with us. She is the R&D Group CEO. She serves as board member of the Africa Diaspora Policy Center and works in Ethiopia to stimulate entrepreneurship, developing soft skills, and creating innovative programs for the youth. Welcome, Rahel. And Dr. Tadela Ferreira, Associate Professor of Economics at Addis Ababa University, and also serves on the Independent Council of Economic Advisors for the government of Ethiopia. Welcome, my panel. Welcome, panelists. Rahel was WhatsApping me early this morning, telling me that she had maybe missed her flight, and she goes, "If I show up with uncombed hair and not the right outfit, but look how fabulous she's looking. So maybe you should miss flights more often." Welcome. I'm going to thank you very much, Luis, for that expansive look at Asia and for giving us another example to look at and to draw from and to benchmark. I'd like to start my first question with Nabil. Nabil, I wanted to ask you if you could, I know you've been working in this sector and we've had many conversations about where the economy is headed and what are the best sort of ways to tweak and to leverage and to learn from different examples. So I wanted to ask you, what are your key takeaways from the presentation that we just saw? And where do you see Ethiopia in the next 10 years using this as the example, using the earlier example about cooking and ingredients? What are the ingredients that we should be taking from the China example and the Asia example in general, not just China, but also Vietnam and Japan? Thank you.
Thank you. 10 years or 10 months? I struggle.
We can get the short-term view and the long-term view if you like.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, and I think it was an excellent presentation and a good discussion so far. Yeah, I think a few takeaways. The first thing is there's a lot to learn from other countries' experiences, success cases and not so successful cases. But I think as Ethiopia, we have to differentiate between emulating and learning. I don't think we can emulate the Chinese. I don't think we can emulate the Singaporeans, the Thais, because we're not Chinese, we're not Singaporean, we're not Thai, we're Ethiopians. And I think we have to really learn, but really also spend a bit of time thinking about what are our capabilities? What do we have as Ethiopians? We talk about the private sector. I do a lot of work around supporting the private sector to play a leading role, but and we talk about the private sector taking a lead, but I still think we have a lot of, we talked about dialogue with the private sector. I mean, it's hard to have dialogue when you don't trust a private sector. I don't mean the government here. I mean, in general, we're still a society that is mistrusting of a private sector, of business. And business, they respond to their incentives, the rules of the game, formal and informal, intended and unintended. The businesses that we have today are the winners of a system. And we have to accept them as our own, and we have to understand why are they the way they are, versus saying, well, the private sector don't really respond, or the private sector didn't do this. They respond naturally to their incentives. But I'll just pose a question for everyone here. What are our capabilities as a private sector? Most countries, you can say, in Germany, they have these sorts of capabilities. The Chinese have this, and so on. What do we say about ourselves as Ethiopia? What are our private sector capabilities? And that's a really good starting point. The second part is around where we're situated and how we're situated as Ethiopia. So the first thing is, what are our capabilities and what are our opportunities? It's clear we have to trade. It's clear we have to be, integrated, hooked in to global supply chains, and global supply chains are changing. Um, we saw the data from Luis's presentation that, China's share hasn't gone down that much. But as you said, also, there's, most supply chains, most sourcing departments are saying, how do we move from these long, complex supply chains that emanate from China, this kind of just-in-time system, to a more kind of more resilient supply chains? They call it just-in-case supply chains. And we've seen Vietnam taking a lot of that opportunity and picking up some of that share. We're seeing a lot of protectionism. We're seeing onshoring or nearshoring. And so the supply chain maps are going to be redrawn. So again, where we're situated, what are our opportunities? There's a lot of talk about AGOA. We didn't talk about it much today. But particularly, the European market, we're very well positioned for that. So I think, it really comes down to, though, kind of a lot of our challenges today have emanated not just from, have we got the right reform agenda, or is it this, or is it that, but how can we execute? We have a lot of think tanks in Ethiopia. We don't have enough do tanks. We really need to be able to, it's not just a case of political will. We've seen over the last 3-4 years, there's been a lot of reform that has been tripped up by the fact that it's not just an economic reform that needs to take place. We talk about land, we talk about foreign exchange. The political economy has come into the picture here, and there's been a lot of political reform that has needed to take place in order for some economic reforms to be fully executed. So I think the main challenges around our capacities, our institutions, and our ability to see through quite long and sometimes, I would say, politically costly decisions. We've seen, the industrial parks movement in Ethiopia, and some of the challenges that those face. Somebody just mentioned housing, which still has not been able to be built. And again, it comes down to the issues between local governments and federal governments, and who picks up the bills. And so it's always these really small issues, and it's not just capacity. We do need good civil servants, but we also need everyone to be working in one direction, whether it's local government, region, federal government, the private sector, foreign investors, and so pulling everyone in one direction. My last comment, I would say, it's, when we look at what are we learning from different countries, I would say the strategy that we're pursuing now, the homegrown economic reform, there's a lot of different things in there. There's a tourism agenda, there's manufacturing, there's agriculture, mining, there's digital economy. This is quite a lot. And I don't know many countries that are good at a lot of things. And so I'm not quite sure what the first priority is going to be. When we think of Germany, we think, oh, they're good at making machines. When we think of most countries, they're good at one or two things. So I think it will be interesting to really think about what's going to be playing the leading role in that, and putting our resource and the government capacity and all the different people that need to come together to make one thing work. And we'll need to prioritize that heavily. Thank you.
Thank you, Nabil. Dr. Tadil, I want to come to you next. So in Lewis's talk, he talked to us about local governance and how strong that was in most Asian countries. He talked to us about land. And then Nabil now added the element about what is it that we're good at, or what is it that we should maybe prioritize or hope that we get lucky on. So let me pose to you, what did you also find interesting about the presentation on the Asian economies? And what are limits to that learning for the Ethiopia context? And what's the best way forward?
Thank you very much, moderator. Also, I'm here as my personal capacity. My suggestions and opinions are my own. That's it. Yeah. I think thank you very much, Luis, for this very insightful presentation. Now, let me divide my my remarks into two from his presentation. One is on macroeconomic indicators or outcomes. I think it's clear that from the macroeconomic indicators, and of course sectoral, there are sectoral issues. Three key messages are there. One is the centrality of manufacturing and agriculture. These two should be encouraged, should be developed for transforming the economy. We cannot transform agriculture without manufacturing. We cannot develop manufacturing without agriculture. So we need both sectors in hand, and that's the first key message. The second one is the role of domestic finance in terms of encouraging investment, and that domestic finance is predictable, sustainable. As you can see from his presentation, the Asian success stories, one of the key characteristics of Asian success stories is they use domestic finance to boost investment and also build domestic capability. The third key message is so this the dual role of export-led and import substitution strategies. So again, like manufacturing, agriculture, we need both. If the country is going to transform, we need to improve the export sector, we need to improve the diversification and upgrading of the quality of the export commodities. Equally important is import substitution. Now we learned from COVID, we learned from the Ukraine-Russian conflict, and that we need to produce what you call basic commodities. Basic commodities. We cannot simply continue to develop with imported commodities, especially basic commodities. So the role of this systematic import substitution of strategic commodities is central in terms of addressing both the domestic demand and the food security challenges of the country. So that is those are the three key messages from the macro and sectoral the macro and sectoral outcomes. Now, those macro and sectoral outcomes are the result of policies and institutions. So simply focusing on the macro outcomes cannot tell you the whole picture. What we need is to understand the drivers of those macroeconomic and sectoral outcomes. Again, three key messages. One is getting the context right to avoid what we call policy over and under design. Policies do not occur in a vacuum. Policies will work in when they fit in a political, economic, and social context. So getting the context right is crucial moving forward, especially design fit for purpose policies and strategies should be informed by what we call integrated context analysis. Without integrated context analysis, without knowing the context, we will have a risk of policy over and under design. I have heard now and over that okay, the policies are okay, right? But what's the challenge is the implementation challenge, and that reflects what calls the policy over design. Policies should be fit. Policy design should take into account the implementation capacity of the countries. So that's the first one. The second message is learning, systematic learning and pragmatism. Those macro and sectoral outcomes as a result of pragmatic policy learning. And flexibility has been central in the Asian success stories. in terms of learning by doing, right? So we learn by doing the things, and also learning can be built from experience elsewhere, like Asia, Vietnam, whatever. But complete rejection or blind rejection or complete acceptance of policies work somewhere else will not be useful, as Dr. Alamayo said earlier. So we need to customize what worked good elsewhere and contextualize given the domestic circumstance. The third message is prioritization and focus. If everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority. So I think identification of priority is important through what you call integrated future analysis. Now the theme of this conference is Ethiopia 2030. Then what will be the Ethiopia status by 2030? Now we need to have that kind of what we call integrated future analysis. In that future analysis, we need to identify what we call high impact interventions, accelerators. That's where you identify. Dr. Ali identified a number of reforms. Which reforms yield the maximum impact? Because resources are scarce, resources in terms of finance, resources in terms of human resources. So we need to identify what's called high impact interventions and get for the maximum impact. So these are three key messages from one, from the policy perspective, second, from the macroeconomic and sectoral outcomes. Now, in terms of the lessons from the Asian success stories presented by Lewis, I think development models varied from country to country. So even although Asian countries are Asians, they are different. There is huge heterogeneity in terms of development. So, but they have commonalities. Now, I identify 6 common features. One is, as presented by Lewis, sound macroeconomic management, interactive policy making, top down, bottom up. Should be a feedback loop in terms of policy decisions. A top down policy making will not work. We need to have what you call a top down as well as a bottom up interaction of policies, like consistency, predictability, and clarity of policies and laws. So these are fundamental adjustment in policy scope and also policy instruments. The policies that we have today and the policy instruments that we have today and the policy instruments and scope 10 years later will not be the same. We need to adjust the policy scope and instruments as learning progresses, as development progresses. That's the key commonality in terms of flexibility in terms of macroeconomic management that's evidence-based. Second feature is political ownership. Now, whatever excellent policies we have, that should be supported by a strong political leadership. So learning and policy experimentation should be supported by the highest level leadership. That's political leadership. It is the leaders should set political priorities, should design policy content, and create the necessary conditions for the transformation of the economy. So that is the political ownership and buy-in and commitment is very, very crucial. Third is the quality of bureaucracy and governance. This is key, by the way. One of the secret success of the East Asian countries is what we call the quality of their bureaucracy and governance, right? So competent and politically insulated technocrats in public offices are very, very fundamental. That's the key, actually. So these are competent and politically insulated technocrats are the ones who put policies into action. Without we talk about institutions. Institutions do not work without technocrats, competent technocrats, professionals who are completely detached from the policy arena. So I think there is Asian proverb, right? Don't look at the color of the cat. What's more important is its purpose. I don't care about the color of the cat as long as it catches a rat. Exactly. So, and that again, if you, for example, exclude competent professional because of